Hello, hello, everybody. Pop culture curator here, back for another fantastic Wednesday review of Gilligan's Island, and I'm here with my ever wonderful co-host, Gorilla's Random Thoughts. How are you doing, Gorilla?
I'm doing all right.
Glad to hear that. I know you're going through a thunderstorm right now, so I'm glad you made it home. Not a thunderstorm, but I know you got a lot of ice and snow on the road, so I'm glad you made it home safe.
Yeah, no, that was all yesterday. They actually, there though yesterday we did. I did find the truck that we were waiting for for over an hour. I found the
Was,
semi.
oh, excuse
He
me.
was sitting in the median about halfway home.
So you got stuck?
Yeah, I'll give props to him. He went straight into the median. He was straight, so they just had to pull him straight out. He didn't jackknife it down a steep hill like the last time I had seen in the ditch last
Oh,
year.
that's not good. Yeah, especially carrying all that weight.
Yeah, but he just went straight in, so it only took two tow trucks to pull him straight out.
Oh, nice. Well, everybody's okay.
Uh, Gotta get props. Well, I don't know if I could give him props for his driving because he went in the ditch, but I guess I could give him props for how he went in the ditch.
For how you went in the ditch. At least you did it eloquently. And
Yeah.
hello, Moira Kitty in the chat. Welcome, welcome. So good to see you.
Hey, Moira.
Yeah, Moira Kitty says, meow, everyone. Yes, hello, and I want to thank you, Moira. I guess Moira is our first visitor, and I'm so happy to have you here, Moira. I think this may be your first time on my channel. And she says, "Per to y'all, how are ya? I am doing actually great. I am so happy every time I can cover Gilligan's Island. I love this show so much. And Gorilla, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, and your son's okay?
Yeah. Yeah. He's. I met my most recent parental milestone. You know how you mark when you get your first steps and your first tooth and all that. Well, I reached
Right.
another milestone with them.
And what's that?
I got my first go fuck yourself.
He told you that?
Oh yeah, I didn't know whether to
Wow.
laugh or spank him.
My God, my mother would have knocked my head off, literally, if I would have ever said that. Even when I turned 18, I never, in my whole life, ever spoke
well,
to my mother that way.
well,
Wow. And
well,
even when I was in my 30s and 40s, I would have expected her to knock the crap out of me if I said that.
I did that one time, just once.
Just once, and you found out not to do it again, right?
Yep. Well, he was mad because I was pissed that he knows he has to bring his planner home. There and I got pissed that he lied to me about it. He's been lying to me a lot
Oh, yeah,
lately.
that's not good. Yeah, that is not good. You need to put a stop to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, teach him the story of the boy who cried wolf. Yeah, tell him one of these days you're going to come to me for help. I'm not going to believe you because you lie so much.
yeah,
And that is a true. It comes true because my sister was one of those. She lies repeatedly. I mean, she's a constant liar. So it's gotten to the point where I don't believe anything she says anymore. It doesn't matter, what it is or how she says it. I just don't believe anything she says anymore. I have no faith in her at all. And Moira Kitty, I'm
yeah.
sorry. She says, I've been here before, but I'm just not fancy enough to be remembered. And yes, you are, Moira. I know who you are. And I apologize for forgetting. And she says, chill, cat, and give him a swat and or take things that are important to him until he acts right. She's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
She's absolutely correct. Yeah, you got to remind him who's the boss and who feeds him, right? Bite the hand that feeds you, as they say.
Well, he's a really good kid.
Oh, I know he is. I'm sure he is. But there's certain things that you don't cross the line on with your parents. That's like sleeping with your parents. There's certain things you just don't do.
Oh,
And
I put into that. I put it into that one.
yeah, because I don't know. I've seen people who do that, and they're what I mean by is I've known people where they let their kids talk to them that way, and every single time when they end up growing up, there's no respect between the two of them, and they usually end up not seeing their kid ever again. My sister was that way. The same sister I told you lied all the time. She let her own son call her by her first name instead of mom. He called her by her first name. No respect whatsoever. He told her off all the time. She was a horrible mother. She was terrible raising him. She let him do whatever he wanted. And now him and her never see each other again because they grew up pretty much hating each other. And Moira says, my daughter is 15, and I did my best early on so she wouldn't be awful now. I'm sure you did, Moira. As a teen,
Yeah.
she has not yelled or slammed a door. There you go. I had a friend who had a son who kept slamming his bedroom door. Finally, my friend took the door off the hinges. That taught him not to do it again. And I know it's tough being a parent, so I'm not going to judge you guys either. So, I mean, the hardest thing is to try to tell somebody how to raise their own kid. That's not something
Yeah.
anybody should ever do. Parents know what they're doing more than anybody.
Yeah, my kid's a good kid.
I know
Every
he is.
once in
I've
a while,
heard him on here before.
you get the tantrums.
Which that's totally fine. And plus, remember, just a week ago, he saved somebody's life. So there you go. He's a
Yeah.
good kid.
Yeah.
Um,
Alrighty.
all
Let's
right.
get on this episode here before we go down the rabbit hole.
Before we go down the rabbit hole, and I know I was telling Gorilla here in the background for those of you guys in the chat and on the rerun. I want to say hello to everybody in the rerun. If you're watching this later on, if you enjoy it, please hit the like and the subscribe and the alert button for notifications. We'll have this stream every week. I also do a Star Trek animated series review on Mondays on my channel. And you will find me on Tuesdays on the wonderful anti-derivative Jill's channel doing a review of Star Trek, the original series. Before we get started really quick, Gorilla, why don't you tell us about your channel?
Oh, well, we do watch parties Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays there. Tonight we didn't do it because I didn't get home in time, but we do Stranger Things tonight. Then we do themed movies on like a monthly theme for movies on Sundays there. We're doing 6 weeks of Christmas though. Then Saturdays is Babylon 5. Then on Thursdays we do a Walton's review. Then but I'm also doing Minecraft or SimCity random streams. I do a lot of shorts. But Monday I think I'm just gonna do like kind of like an open kind of stream like I did Monday when I was kind of bothered there on Monday. There, I just decided to stream and it turned out really good. So I think I'm gonna do more of those.
And that helps kind of cheer you up too, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, me and Indy had a good talk there. So the Germ came on too later on, and it's nice having people in the chat.
Yes, it is. And Moira says, I'm not here to tell you all how to raise kids. I'm here as moral support. Yes, and thank you for that, Moira. Phil Oiler, so good to see you. He says, hi, Moira. And Ola Greg says, hug. Or Moira says, hug, Greg. So, yeah, people are coming in. It's so good to see you guys again. On the screen here, what you see is a picture of Sherwood Schwartz, the fantastic creator of Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch. And I'm going to read from his book a little bit before we get started. We have 2 episodes coming up today. And I hope if you've seen these episodes before, then maybe this will kind of remind you of your childhood memories, and maybe some of these things will come back to you. If you have not seen these episodes, I highly recommend that you do. You should be able to find them on Amazon and other streaming services, but I recommend purchasing, honestly, if you can.
Right.
If you can have the physical copies, those are always a lot better.
Do you need me to keep an eye on the chat while you read?
Yes, that would be great. Yes.
Okay.
Today we're going to be covering Angel on the Island. Will be our first episode, and our second episode will be a clip episode called Birds Gotta Fly, Fish Gotta Swim. And when we get to, Birds Gotta Fly, Fish Gotta Talk. And when we get to that episode, I'll explain a little more about what a clip episode is. So, I have in my hands the book Inside Gilligan's Island, From Creation to Syndication, written by Sherwood Schwartz, the man you see in the picture. And I've covered a few parts of this book in some of our prior streams, but today I'm going to cover how he came to the idea of what kind of castaways and what kind of characters he wanted on his island. The last time we covered how he was able to get the show greenlit from the networks, but now, and his original inspiration and where he got the inspiration from, or the idea for Gilligan's Island. But today, like I said, we're going to cover a little bit about where he came up with the idea of the different characters. Get my starting point here. I spent weeks going from one concept to another, looking for a fresh idea, not another domestic sitcom, not a bumbling private eye or I want something unique. a concept with which I could say something important, even though it would be in comedy terms. One day, the idea of a group of diverse characters being forced to live together began to take shape. They would be a family, but of a very different sort. What brings them together, and why are they forced to stay together? Maybe a desert island, I thought. There's little likelihood they would be found, and if their boat were wrecked, they couldn't escape. A great many comic possibilities came to mind immediately based on two major themes: the problems of modern man dealing with primitive life on an uninhabited island, and the conflicts among people as they are forced to adjust to each other. The world, in a very real sense, is an island where Americans, Russians, Arabs and Jews, Turks and Armenians, Irish and English, all must somehow learn to live together if they are to remain alive at all. Rich nations, poor nations, religious nations, godless nations, big nations, small nations, modern nations, backward nations, all exist on the same island we call Earth. The more I thought about this idea, the better I liked it. But how long would a series like this last? The same group of people on the same little desert island. Would enough viewers tune in? In television in those years, a program needed 20 million viewers each week just to remain on the air. Can you imagine any other business where you would be a failure if you only pleased 15 or 60 million a week? Television is a hard taskmaster, but that's the game I was in. If you want to play a game, you have to play by the rules. Would there be enough stories? That question would take considerable exploration. I began to make notes on various problems that would occur for a group of people stranded on a deserted island. Some of the stories were strictly problems with nature. Would the food supply last? Would a hurricane wipe out their crude huts? Would their water supply end? Would they have trouble with various wild animals? Or quicksand? Or poisonous insects? There certainly seemed to be a wide variety of catastrophes available to the castaways. What about stories concerning interrelationships? That, of course, would depend on the castaways. Before attempting to develop stories, I'd have to settle on the cast of characters who were shipwrecked together. That jigsaw puzzle took me several weeks to put together. First of all, how many castaways should there be on the as yet unnamed island? In a half hour format, it's very difficult to deal with a large cast. When you subtract commercials, opening, closing, and station breaks, about 23 minutes of actual airtime. This is back in 1965, people. Now a half hour show is maybe 15 minutes with commercials, but that's my personal note. So should there be six castaways? Seven? Eight? Nine? Certainly no more than nine. Less would be better to devote more time to the story and character relationships. You never hear that anymore, right? Devoting time to the story. Maybe eight then or seven. Would an even number be better or an odd number? More women or more men? Or somewhere beach? As I started to work out the characters, the two people who immediately became fixed were the skipper and his assistant. On a little charter boat, the skipper wouldn't have more than one assistant almost from the first moment of conception. The luckless, hapless, hopeless skipper's mate became the star of the show, and the importance of the relationship between the skipper and his incompetent assistant was just as obvious right from the start. The picture in my mind of the skipper and Gilligan never varied from the instant I thought of them together. The skipper was a large man, really big, and Gilligan was small and thin. Maybe I was influenced by the image of Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. Their passengers had to be carefully delineated to form the social microcosm I was attempting. After all, this limited cast would have to represent prototypes of many different personalities in our society. I also knew they would have to be extreme forms, more caricatures than characters. Characters may be one dimensional or cardboard, but they are very effective in television in making that role memorable. Archie wasn't a little bigoted in All in the Family. He was totally bigoted in every conceivable way. That's what made him unforgettable. Lucy wasn't a little scatterbrained in I Love Lucy. She was completely scatterbrained and equally unforgettable. And Dolly Parton is also unforgettable for two reasons. The five passengers aboard the SS Minnow, I determined, would be equally exaggerated. They would also have to represent extremes in social, intellectual, and financial terms, as well as in background, personality, and even in size. Excuse me. It's impossible to reconstruct all the thoughts that led me to my final decisions, but after a week of juggling combinations of castaways, the final result was five passengers: Mr. and Mrs. Thurston Howell III, married and super wealthy, Ginger, single and super beautiful, the professor, single and super intellectual, and Marianne, single and super virginal. In a further effort to make the characters prototypes rather than completely flesh and blood, I decided to call them only first names or nicknames, except for Mr. and Mrs. Thurston Howell III, of course, because that would have been out of keeping with their characters. I don't know what prompted me to do the following. I got a roll of 3-foot wide butcher paper and tacked it on the walls of the room where I worked. The paper encircled the entire room except for the windows and the doors. Then I spent about a week with a felt tip pen writing sample storylines for the series on that butcher paper. Somehow I figured if I could fill those walls with storylines, there would be enough plots for episodes to keep the series on the air. When I finally finished circling the room with my felt tip pen, I had 31 stories written on the paper. I don't know if any other writer ever used that particular technique in developing sample stories for series presentations, but it worked for me. At this point, the show had no name. I knew I wanted the word island in the title, and I wanted the island to be named after the skipper's hapless mate. Believe it or not, it took me 3 weeks to settle on the name Gilligan. This may seem a terrible waste of time to some, but it was important to me. There are many names that would make the series like a dramatic show. Johnson's Island, Thompson's Island, Wilson's Island, etc. I also didn't want a ridiculous name like Wicklepeck's Island or Hogfighter's Island. So I just kept looking through telephone book after telephone book until I hit the name Gilligan. I felt Gilligan was amusing enough to indicate a comedy series and acceptable enough to avoid burlesque. Now that I had the name of characters, I wrote a short description of each of them, where they came from, occupations, interests, and why they were aboard this small charter boat near Hawaii. I also described the characters physically in order to help with the casting, if and when that ever took place. Those descriptions became the Bible. Incidentally, there's one serious problem all writers face. They are people. They eat and sleep. They catch colds. They have to take out the trash, change light bulbs, go shopping, and pay the bills just like everyone else. In addition to being people, some writers are also husbands, wives, or parents like me. During those months, I was developing Gilligan's Island. I went to PTA meetings, Little League games, school plays, music recitals, and I helped all 4 of the youngsters with homework and projects. Aside from the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, other things happened while I was working on the presentation for Gilligan's Island. One day, some men were sawing down a huge eucalyptus tree in our backyard, not far from the room which I was typing. The racket from that chainsaw was god awful. I sat at my typewriter, unable to think. Not only that, the noise of the chainsaw ripping through the wood set up such violent vibrations I had to clutch my typewriter to keep it from shimmying off the table. When we finally finished work, they rang the bell and asked if I wanted them to saw the eucalyptus in sections for firewood. I remember eucalyptus was great for fires. It snapped and crackled and had a wonderful aroma. It would salvage something for me from that wasted day. I thanked them for the idea, and they cut up the eucalyptus and piled it in the backyard. And I'm going to stop there. I mean, there's more to the story, but I'll continue more of that next week. But that's basically how Sherwood Schwartz came up with the idea for the 7 castaways and their characters. And he has illustrations, like he said, to help with the casting. So he envisioned them all in his head even before they had hired any actors.
Yeah. Okay. You know, Greg said modern people would go crazy without the internet.
Oh, yeah, right? Can you imagine? People actually had to work hard those days, and they had to actually have to pick up telephone. Imagine the days where someone had, when you were talking to somebody, they'd all call at home because they couldn't wait till they got to a phone.
Yeah,
Things have completely changed, that's for sure.
Is it cutting out for anybody else, or is it just my computer? Your mic's popping.
For those of you guys in the Moira and Euler, my mic or your mic? Mine?
Well, you're popping a little bit when you're talking. It's better now that I'm not sure if it's my side or if it's your side.
For those of you, Moira and Euler Greg, for those of you in the chat, please let us know about how we sound. Let me know if my voice is cutting out or if you hear any interference. I usually try to avoid that. I'll do my best not to move around. I have my mic pinned down the best I can. But even still, then it's not enough always.
That sounded better. Maybe it's my end.
All right, my be when I share something, like because I was sharing that photo, and now that I'll be sharing the video, we're going to start our presentation of our first episode. Hopefully, it won't cut out. So here we start with our usual opening, and there we have our fantastic cast on the boat. I'm showing these clips every 10 seconds, everybody, so I don't get any copyright warning. In our previous streams, I was doing them like every 3 or 5 seconds, and I've got a little bit of warnings from CBS. So I changed them to every 10 seconds. I apologize. If there's any specific scenes I want to highlight, I will try to cover those.
Okay. Greg was saying it's happening to Greg too.
Uh, I hate this mic. I'm serious. All right, I want to see if I can hold it up closer to my mouth, if that'll help. I don't know if this sounds any better.
Yeah, it does actually.
Got to try to keep my dogs away from it too, as well. Okay. Written by Herbert Finn and Alan Dinehart. Here we have where the castaways are testing out a telephone system using coconuts and string.
Does that actually even work?
Yes, it actually does. Scientifically, it does work. If you hold the strings, when I was a kid, they even sold these toys where it was these two metal, it was like a metal kind of a circular device you would hold in your hand, and it had a string that attached to the other end, and you could tell your friends to talk in it. And honestly, it was hard to hear through it because you can hear their voice standing next to you. But the sound principle does work, where it's based on the vibration of the line. So, for example, if Skipper is, that line will vibrate, and that vibrate will transfer to the piece that Gilligan is holding, and it would also vibrate, which would reproduce the sound. That certain technique that I speak of is how they originally invented the record player. Alexander Graham Bell, I believe, is the one who invented the original phonograph, and that's how he used it, was based on sound waves and vibrations. So it is scientifically possible. But I don't think it's as accurate as people think it is. I don't know if you can actually understand clear words over it. And here's where Marianne says she has not seen Ginger, and she's awfully worried about her. And Skipper tells Gilligan that they're going to spread out and start searching the island. Hopefully they can find Ginger. And Gilligan, of course, says cancel that last call. And here they go looking for her. And Skipper tells Gilligan that he'll go one direction, and he tells Gilligan to go the other direction. And the first thing that happens, of course, Gilligan goes the wrong way.
He says that when Pop was young, she was 2 cups of string was called a telephone.
Right, I know, right? I could picture the devices in my head, but what I should have done is I should have pulled up some pictures off the internet to show you guys what I'm talking about. They were just made out of aluminum. They were like a round disc with aluminum handle. And Gilligan spots Ginger. She's crying, unfortunately.
Well, they were shouting all over looking for her, you know.
Yeah, but I think she heard them shouting, and she just wasn't trying to get any attention, I think, is it?
Yeah. Here's something I had a question. So she's an actress. She's supposed to be an actress, right? When someone says they make their debut, doesn't that mean that's their first showing ever? Like, that's their first ever show?
Well, that's just it. Didn't she say... Well, I'll give you an example. There's 2 different kind of debuts. You can debut in a movie, and you can also debut on Broadway. So I think she might be saying that this was her debut on Broadway. Isn't that what she said?
Okay. So she's a film actress, but wants to get into plays.
Which a lot of them do, right? In fact, a lot of them start on stage first and then go into movies.
Oh, okay.
Those are usually the ones that tend to be better at acting, which is what we don't have anymore. And that's the reason why we have in current Hollywood. That's why they're all terrible because none of them have any stage experience. Those that have stage experience, like Anthony Hopkins and some of the big ones, you can really tell when they do movies, and they've got like stacks of Academy Awards. So Ginger's depressed because she's holding the script that was supposed to be for her. I believe it was Broadway debut, a play she was supposed to do. And that's what she's sad about, is now that she's on the island, she's going to miss that debut, which is supposed to happen any day now. And that means, apparently, the way the terminology goes with Broadway, that means she has an understudy who knows all the lines and has them memorized as well. And that means the understudy is going to get her part. And no actor or actress wants to see that happen. And Gilligan's remembering his memories of something in the past, which really doesn't relate very well. And he's not doing a good job. And here's where she starts reading about the play, reading lines from the play. And she says how this play would have made her famous overnight. And she said the producers would be clamoring for me.
Well, okay, so that's kind of awfully presumptuous of her to think that she'll do such a great job that she'll be that famous. That's almost
a lot of stars think that. I know, but a lot of people, that's why you hear the old adage and the old story of all the young people that go to Hollywood thinking that they're going to be the next biggest star, and they end up on the strip and on drugs and all this other stuff. Because in their head, they think they're the best out there, and they're just waiting for that day where they see their name in spotlights. So it is realistic. And here's where Skipper and Marianne are talking, and they're trying to figure out a way of cheering Ginger up. And Skipper tells Marianne that is Ginger's lunch that he has. And he says, make sure she eats it all. She needs to keep up her strength. But Ginger's like me. When she's stressing out, she does not eat. That's how I am. Yeah. I know some people, when they're stressing, they eat a lot, but I'm the opposite. I have no appetite.
Yeah. The one thing I do like about the show though is that whenever one of them is feeling down, they'll try to find a way to cheer him up. Like when Skipper was feeling down the other day because of Watubi or because of Kona, they threw him a party. Kona. Then this episode, they're doing their best to cheer Ginger up.
Exactly, which is great because that's more like a family. In real life, they probably wouldn't care. They'd say, "Oh, I'll just let her cry, let her sulk." And Gilligan is reading the play, saying, "I don't blame her. I was just reading the play, and they agree that it was a great play." And Gilligan starts reading some of the lines from the play and kind of over dramatizing. And Mr. Howell, upon hearing this, thinks that Gilligan is about to mutiny. So he comes in saying, "Captain, throw this man in irons." And as you can see, Skipper's laughing, telling Mr. Howell that it's just a play. And Mr. Howell says, "Great, because I never want to see a mutiny before lunch." And Gilligan explains to Mr. Howell that she was supposed to have been on Broadway last night and she missed her Broadway debut. And Mr. Howell comes up with a wonderful idea that he'll host the play. And the play is successful, then when they are rescued, he will fund it to have it on Broadway starring her. So he says that if it's good, we can take it to Broadway. And Gilligan says, and if it's a flop, you can deduct it from your income tax. And Mr. Howell likes that idea. And here's Marianne still consoling Ginger, and Ginger's getting over it. Yeah. She says, "Thanks, Marianne, I'll be all right."
Yeah. Mr. Howell made a joke in there, but I can't remember quite what it was. But I was going to talk to you about this, but I can't remember what the joke was quite off the top of my head.
Well, was it the joke where he said that he wasn't sure if he wanted to invest the million? Oh, Gilligan said, "Well, you can make millions," and he said, "I already have millions." And he said, "Well, it could be a tax write-off." He goes, "Then I'll do it."
No. It's another joke that the way I interpret it now with all the stuff that we found out going on in Hollywood there, there. It wouldn't fly today, but it could have just been the way I interpreted it because of modern things. If it pops up, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I feel bad because the way we have to do these slides, it's kind of we do miss a lot of the jokes, and I apologize for that, everybody.
Yeah, is there a way
That's
to
why
just
once again, I recommend you watching this.
yeah?
What's that?
Well, is there a way just to slide it back just like a couple seconds? He made it when Skipper was there. There. No, maybe it was
Was
further on. Maybe it was
was it
further on because
before? Was it before or after this scene?
he said it to Skipper when Skipper came over. Maybe
So
it
was
was
it during the
further
scene?
on.
You think?
It was further on. It was way further on.
Okay. Okay, so it's after this.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's where Gilligan comes in with the wonderful idea about the stage play. Mr. Howell will take it to Broadway, he says, when we get rescued. And that cheers up Ginger. And she even says, "Oh, Gilligan, you made me so happy." That's the news she was hoping to hear. And the first thing she says is, "Get ready for the play." And here we have the wonderful Mrs. Howell typing. It's a good thing they happened to bring along a typewriter, considering back then they weighed 50 pounds. Well, the part calls for someone who has a magnificent physique, Mr. Howell says. And she says, "Well, I'm ready, dear." And he starts quoting. Mr. Howell is basically having her rewrite the play for him. So he's quoting the play from the book, and he's customizing it for his own reasons, and he's having Mrs. Howell take dictations on the typewriter. And he reads off a line from Mark Antony in the play to Cleopatra. Unfortunately, Mrs. Howell only has MARC. She's never touched a typewriter before, and she doesn't understand. She says that the ABCs are all mixed up. Oh, and which reminds me of something. Gorilla, do you know why the ABCs are all
It had to do something with the way our brain
or
works,
do you
and then
understand my
it
question?
makes it. Yeah, I know. It's just like our keyboards now. It just has to do with the way something to do with the way our brains work, and it just makes it easier to type. I just got in their position by which ones are used the most. There, that's what there where you're supposed to put your hands is where you got those little lines on your keyboard. There, it just makes it easier to type out stuff.
Well, that's not completely correct. That's not completely correct. The keyboard that we use is called a QWERTY keyboard, QWERTY. And the reason why that the letters are in the positions that they are in are because in the old days, if any of you are old enough like me, has ever seen an old manual typewriter where it had physical keys? When you pushed a button, a key would come up and strike the drum and type that letter on the drum. You hit another key, and then another arm would come up and strike it on the drum. If you use two letters that are constantly, let's say TH, for example, TH is often used together in a word like the, this, there. On old typewriters, if you put those two letters together, when you hit them, those two keys will get stuck together. So what they would do is if you get two letters that are used often together, they would put them on separate parts of the keyboard so that when the keys struck the drum, those arms would not get stuck or detached or stuck to each other. So the only reason why the keys are laid out the way they are was so that each arm would touch independently of the drum and not hit each other. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Because anybody, if you've ever gotten your hands on an old typewriter, and I used to do it too when I get my hands on typewriter, if you start banging on the keys, the first thing they do is they all clump up together and jam and get stuck together. And you have to reach out and separate the keys and put them back down in their laid positions. It looks kind of like a piano. But the only reason why essentially the letters are in the position they are was so those arms would not hit each other as they were typed in the drum or get jammed. And now that we don't use physical typewriters anymore that have those arms, they probably could go and redesign the keyboard in ABC order. But the fact that
Yeah.
the QWERTY keyboard has been around so long, they're not going to change it. And plus, you have typists who have been typing for a long time. You're not going to have them reprogram what they know in their mind. Yes, did you have something to say?
No, no, no.
Okay,
But if
so
they redesign it there, then everybody would have to retake their typing classes.
well, they would. Do they still offer typing classes?
Well, we got computer classes there, and they teach you how to type there. We had to take a computer class in like seventh grade, and we're required to do like they wanted us to do like 30 or 60 words a minute or something like that.
Good, good, yes. You see, when I went to school, typing, believe it or not, was a an elective. So most of the people didn't take it at all. I did, but most of the people did not take typing because it was an elective. Most people wanted the fun stuff. But when I was a teacher, I helped bring in. We got a. I'll make this fast. I helped write a $1.4 million grant, and I brought in all this money for computers. And the first thing I did is I brought into the district is I told the teachers, I said, these kids need to learn how to type. So I wanted to buy software for the computers. Mavis Beacon teaches typing, but I told them to teach the kids how to type. And that was an uphill battle because the teachers thought the kids did not need to learn how to type. They said, oh, they don't need to learn how to type. They could take that in high school if they want to. And I said, no, every kid needs to learn how to type. I said, the computer is going to be their future. I said, and that'll always give them a job possibility. And I eventually won that battle. And next thing you know, the whole district started teaching, every school started teaching typing to the kids. And when that happened, we started getting kids in third and fourth grade. They were 60 words a minute, and they were typing without even looking. So the teachers realized that I was right. And then now, fast forward, everybody's doing it, thank goodness. So that's what I always envisioned and I hope for, that they would make it mandatory, that everybody should get the opportunity to learn. Anyway, back to this Gilligan's Island. Sorry for the tangent. So Mr. Howell realizes that Levy is only typing with one finger at a time, and that's why he says this is going to be a long rewrite. And here comes Ginger in, all excited and hyped up for the play, and she tells Mr. Howell, "Oh, Gilligan told me that you're going to produce my play." And
Yeah,
he's telling her, "Yes, I am." And she says, "Okay, I'll see you at reversal, huh?"
yeah. All right, there's a very funny thing. Oh, you got it! You got it! This
Right.
was I
Ginger
laughed
gives
so
him a
hard at this.
right. Ginger says, "I wanted to give you my gratitude," and she gives Mr. Howell a kiss on the cheek. And Mrs. Howell, I pointed out before, Mrs. Howell is no dummy. So Mrs. Howell says, "And if I were you, I'd wipe her gratitude off my face." And of course,
I
Mr.
laughed.
Howell knows he doesn't want to. That's what's so great is the humor is still funny even today. I love it. And Mr. Howell wipes the kiss off his cheek, and they continue. And Ginger was practicing her lines, saying, "Oh, there's a boat out there. Hello, hoy!" And Gilligan comes running in, thinking, "I thought there was a ship in the harbor." He thought that she had actually spotted a boat. He didn't. He hadn't realized that she was reading from her lines. Is my
They
mic
did
still
that
cutting out?
yeah, just a tiny bit there. And the one thing about this series, they almost started overdoing the joke, but they didn't quite pass that threshold. Because they say that like there's a rule
Right.
of
It got
three
right to
there.
the point.
But there's some shows
I
that
totally agree because there are times when they go overboard. Right. Sorry. Go ahead, Gorilla.
like the perfect example is like DS9. There's a joke where Grand Gazette gets removed from power, and Brunt takes over the Ferengi Empire or whatever you want to call it. And every single time, ever someone would say Grand Nagus Brunt, there they say acting Grand Nagus Brunt. I think I took a shot every time they said that, and I think I took like 8 or 9 fucking shots. There's like done way too much. Like there's the power of threes or four. If they would have done it 3 or 4 times, it would
Exactly.
have been like the perfect
Yeah, because
joke.
especially with a joke, it can get old really fast.
Yeah.
Yep. You can
But I
definitely
think
ruin a good
Gilligan
joke
only
by
did
over
it like,
repeating it. Definitely.
yeah, I think Gilligan only did it like 3 times, didn't he?
Possible. And what we're talking to for everybody in the chat, what we're talking about is, and we'll see later on in this episode, is it's basically the character is rehearsing their lines, saying, "Oh, look, I see a ship in the distance," and Gilligan always comes running in, saying, where, and then not realizing that they're practicing their lines. So this is the joke that Gorilla is referring to. And I have to admit, Ginger looks wonderful in that Hawaiian suit there.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
professor is helping. Go ahead.
Where the hell did they get all this paint from?
Well, then this is exactly what they're talking about. Gilligan says, "Where'd you get the paint?" And the professor says he made it from berries.
Oh shit! I must have missed that part.
That's okay because when he does that, Gilligan sticks his finger in the boat in the bowl, and even says, "And it's also delicious." And it's hard to catch this joke, but what happens is Gilligan's working on the door, and they walk over to the door. I'm gonna go back here. Hold on a second.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I
This is
did
where
catch it.
Skip. Right, Gilligan made the door, and the skipper says, "Gilligan, you're supposed to make the door swing in and not out." And Gilligan says, "What? What do you mean? Oh no, Gilligan, that's wrong." He says, and Gilligan opens the door out, and you hear the skipper cry out. That's when they open the door, and they see the skipper laying on the ground outside. Apparently, he just happened to be walking by while they opened the door. And Skipper asked Gilligan, or Gilligan asked Skipper, "Are you mad?" So here's where Marianne comes with Skipper's wardrobe. Skipper is also going to be in the play. Oops, sorry, went a little too far ahead. And here's Mr. Howell, who comes out as producer and, of course, also overdressed. And he calls out his cast of characters. And here comes Skipper in, saying, "Professor, here we are, Mr. Howell." Unfortunately, Gilligan is standing on Skipper's wardrobe. Oh, it happens later, doesn't it? I don't want to give away the jokes. So here they all come out, and the professor's working on the set. And Mrs. Howell comes out. No, it's Ginger. Ginger comes out, and as you can see, she's dressed as Cleopatra. And Mr. Howell is commenting Ginger on how wonderful she looks, and he even uses the joke, "I envy that snake, my dear. Thank you." For those of us in the know, he's speaking of the asp snake that bit Cleopatra.
Oh,
And he
I
says,
guess I don't remember that story.
yeah, Cleopatra was a famous Cleopatra, a snake bit her, and that's how she ended up kicking the bucket. All right, everybody, clear the stage, says Mr. Howell. And everybody's setting their places and getting started. And once again, Ginger's reading her line, "Hark, I see a boat." And unfortunately, Gilligan, "Look, I see a ship in the harbor," she says. And Gilligan runs in a second, and "Where is it? Where is it?" Thinking that they're going to be rescued. Mr. got upset and said, "Oh, it's just the play." And now he starts calling out for the maid. The maid, this is the scene where the maid needs to come in. And I have to say that Natalie Shaper does hilarious. I mean, she is so underrated and so funny. Take it from the top. And once again, Ginger starts reading, "A ship. Look, in the harbor. I see a ship." And she's giving her cue for the person to come out, and they haven't came out yet. Finally, here comes Mrs. Howell as the maid. And as you can see, Mrs. Howell is not used to carrying trays. And she keeps knocking over the cup, which is obviously empty.
Oh, that was so funny later on there.
Yes, this is actually a very funny episode. This has got to be. I would say this is in my top 10 out of all Gilligan's Island episodes. It's hilarious. So, like I said earlier, if any of you in the chat have not seen it, I highly recommend it so you can catch all the jokes. So, Mrs. Howell has trouble holding that tray with one hand. I think it's too heavy. So, she's struggling keeping that cup upright. And the first thing she does is walks right in front of Ginger. And Mr. Howell has to remind her that you never upstage your star. And that's a good shot. Thank you. No, Ginger. And Mr. Howell says, yeah, you never upstage your actor and stand in front of them and block their face. And there he is talking to Mrs. Howell. And now he's explaining to Mrs. Howell that you're a non-entity, a very lowly person. You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
And Mrs.
Oh.
Howell doesn't like. Yes.
Oh no! Finish your sentence. I found what I was looking for.
And he's
Wait.
talking to Ginger now. He says, and you incidentally look every inch a queen. Yes.
Okay, so what I was talking about there was Mr. Howell is when he said, "Oh well, I'd like to read it. I've backed a few shows in my time, musicals, Dancing Girls. It's the only business where you could be a devil when you're an angel. You get it?"
All right.
Okay, it almost seemed like kind of like uh I I don't know how to put it. It seemed kind of like a little Weinstein feeling to me, but I might be misinterpreting it. If
You mean the
know
way
what
he's
I mean.
talking to Ginger?
Yeah, like how Cosby Weinstein treated the actresses on the shows, to get them the roles.
Well, I think the term is the casting couch, right? They used to. And I honestly, I think you're right. I think they were kind of hinting at that without actually going there. But he was,
Yeah.
which is also part of the plot. He's heaping a lot of praise on Ginger, telling her how fabulous and how wonderful she looks and how beautiful she is. And at the same time, he's reminding Lovey Howell, his wife, that she's supposed to be playing a servant, which is a non-entity, a low life, with that nobody ever talks to and doesn't even look at, and which doesn't ring too well with Mrs. Howell, unfortunately. And here he is raining praise on Ginger, and you can see Mrs. Howell speaks up. And of course, Mr. Howell says, "Yes, what is it, my dear?" And she doesn't like a word with you alone. And I think we know what's coming up here. And this is the point where Mrs. Howell says, "Do you still love me?" And he says, "Of course I do." And of course, she's going to use that to manipulate, and which is not good. This is one thing I don't like when people manipulate people. This rubs me the wrong way, but that's what she does. And I guess that's what a married couple would do. But needless to say, Mrs. Howell is jealous because he's been putting all this attention on Ginger. And she's complaining that her part is so small. And she thinks she needs a larger part. And Mr. Howell agrees, well, I guess her playing a servant isn't exactly typecasting, is it? And he's naming off the different roles. And when he mentions the only part left is Cleopatra, her eyes widen, and she seems to like that idea.
But you think she would? You think she would wanted Ginger to have the Cleopatra role since this was only set up to cheer up Ginger?
Exactly right. But her jealousy kicked in first, unfortunately. She is vain after all. And Mr. Howell calls out everyone on the stage. That's it, on the double. And here he has an announcement to make. And he's let everybody know that he's decided on a slight cast change, which is not really slight. It's actually very big. And he lets everybody know that Mrs. Howell will play the part of Cleopatra, which, as you can see from Ginger, that does not bode well. And he says, and Ginger will play the part of the maid, and he immediately gives Ginger the smallest part in the play, which defeats the whole purpose of having the play. And as you can see, everyone is very confused. So here we are. Everybody, everyone's redressed in their new parts, and Mrs. Howell is now playing Cleopatra. And she says that she sees a boat in the harbor, and when she says, Gilligan runs in and say, "We're saved, we're saved." So that's the third time we've seen this joke, right? This is what you referred to about three times.
Here, should I go get a shot glass?
She, sure, go for it.
I got work early in the morning. We got overtime now.
And this is where Gilligan realizes, oh yeah, it's just the play, and he once again, okay. Excuse me, Mr. Howell, he says. Okay, and now Mr. Howell says, okay, take it from the top, Lovey. And now Mrs. Howell now says her line's a cue for the maid. And Gilligan says that Ginger doesn't want to come up. And she says, oh dear, it's so hard to keep help these days, says Mrs. Howell. And Mr. Howell's upset because Ginger is not happy, and he says our little children in a tantrum world. It's a temperament, as he raised a tantrum himself. And Ginger is sulking in the hut. Hey, Gorilla, you there?
Yeah.
I have a question. I was thinking, do you think this hut is the same one that they used for the Skipper and Gilligan? They just changed it slightly?
More likely save money. But I got a question. Why do they
Yeah,
keep?
yeah, because the door looks the same, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Why would they put the beam so low that people would smack their head on it though?
Yeah, you would think so. It sure leaves it open for a lot of jokes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And here's where Ginger's depressed because she said she was going to open on Broadway, but now she sees that's not going to happen. And they're telling her that they were trying to cheer her up. And here's where she says something a little dark. I may do something desperate. And here we are. Sorry about that cut scene there. Let me try to fix that. Oh, Gilligan, out, she said. So she starts crying and she tells them to just leave.
Yeah, well, Gilligan...
And they kick Gilligan out.
I can't remember what Gilligan said, but it was something really insensitive.
Well, yeah, but not intentional. He always says, just like earlier when she was reading her lines, he says things that are insensitive, he doesn't realize it. In fact, he says the exact wrong thing.
Yeah.
So here's where the skipper comes out reading, "Oh, my fair queen, come away with me." What's that?
No, I was gonna say, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, he doesn't do it intentionally, but he did say the wrong thing.
Right. And here comes Skipper is all dressed up in his costume, and he's playing Mark Antony.
It's kind of convenient though that
And
they had this. They had a couple.
I think of a
weeks
certain
on
line.
Yeah, it's kind of convenient. They had 2 weeks on the boat that matched exactly with what they needed.
Oh, you mean the wigs for Cleopatra and the maid?
Yeah, how convenient.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? Of course, as we all know, that every now and then you're going to see a lot of props that you're going to, like I said with the typewriter, how those get aboard the boat. Also, a small background production note. Alan Hale Jr., who played the skipper, injured his ear on this episode. So you're going to see shots like in this still here where he's got a bandage above his right ear. So that was from an injury where he got cut. And Skipper reminds Gilligan that I'm trying to mind. Please stop interrupting me, Gilligan. And Gilligan interrupts him again and starts clapping. And as you can see, Skipper is frustrating and he gets his lines wrong because Gilligan messed him up. And now Mr. Howell is praising Mrs. Howell because he knows that's the best thing if he doesn't want to get in trouble. And of course, Mrs. Howell is playing a bad actress, so she's not doing it well. And he tells her to pretend that she's eating a Hungarian dinner, and that raises her hopes. And Mr. Howell calls for curtain, lights. And she starts reading her lines. Sorry about my dog. And my heart beats so. And she says it in a very low voice. And now Mr. Howell calls for Mark Antony, who is being played by the skipper. And there's the skipper excitedly, but of course the skipper is not an actor, so he's not getting his lines right. Every time he comes out, he gets them wrong. And she says, I can scarce hear my lover's approach. And here comes Skipper excitingly. Oh, gracious greet. And of course, he messes the lineup again. And then he tells Mr. Howell that Gilligan's been pestering him. And Mr. Howell says to do it again, of course, like they always do on a play. Just do it again until you get it right. And there's Skipper outside in the back again, getting ready for his cue. And Gilligan is interrupting him again. And Skipper's getting upset. So he's telling Gilligan, can you go help with the scenery or the props or something? Just anything, get out of here. And Skipper hears his line. He comes out, oh, gracious sailor queen, thy happy greet. And once again, he messes up his lines because Gilligan interrupted him. And here comes Gilligan with a ladder because Skipper told him to help with the props or something. So as he starts to read their lines, and there she is. And here she is complaining, saying that the other actors are not remembering their lines. And Gilligan walks on stage during rehearsals with the ladder. And Mr. Howell reminds him not while they're rehearsing. And Gilligan says, oh, okay, I'll take it backstage, and decides to take it through the back door. And as he takes it through the back door, Skipper enters and breaks the ladder. You need to watch the joke, but basically, Gilligan's walking out the door as Skipper's walking in. So he's pushing the ladder all the way through Skipper's. And as he does that, he breaks every rung on the ladder.
Here's an issue I had here. And maybe this is just my experience with ladders. That would have either knocked him so hard back he will have fallen off the back of the stage, or it will have snapped his neck.
Well, you figure if the rungs in the ladder,
if that ladder was that weak, they'd be falling off it every time they step on it.
Right. So, right. Well, they obviously did that for the gag, because you're right. If the rungs were really that weak, it would have injured Skipper and knocked him back, and they would not have broken that easily. They would not be able to support the weight of somebody standing on them. So, it was obvious that it was done for the gag. By the way, it's an old gag that's been done before with Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, and just to be brutally honest here, if they're on the island, all they're eating is fruits and vegetables, I think the skipper will have lost a little weight by now.
Yeah, you would think so, right? But remember, they also still have, I don't know, seafood fattening, lobster, crab, all that kind of stuff.
There's absolutely no fat on them. There's not. It's like the leanest meat or protein you can get. That's why a lot of diets would prefer you to eat fish and all that, is because like your beef and your pork and that can put some weight on you.
Yeah, I agree there, especially pork, right?
Yeah, well, beef especially, because we technically don't even fully process all the protein in that's it. In beef, especially if it's not fully cooked, like if you like yours rare,
right?
We don't fully. It takes a long time to process it.
Yeah, that's why I don't eat rare meat.
Oh,
not only that, because I don't want. What's that?
I love my food rare.
Oh, really? Okay, still bleeding, huh?
Yeah, not raw, but bleeding.
Are you talking about all beef or just steak or what?
Well, I should say is I like my steaks and my roasts like that, but like my hamburgers have to be well done. my dad was a meat inspector for 20 years, and one thing he told me is like with your steaks and all that, if there's anything on them, it'll be on the outside of the steak. So when you cook it, all that what's ever on it gets cooked off and burnt off. But as soon as you
Right.
ground it into hamburger and all that, everything that was on the outside gets mixed into it. So therefore, that's why I like my hamburgers well done.
That totally makes sense. And as you can see here, the skipper's a little frustrated here with Gilligan, or I should say a lot. And that's an excellent still there. And as also, as you can see, he's frustrated. And Mr. and Mrs. Howell back in their hut. And Mr. Howell, of course, is praising Lovey on her wonderful acting. Although that last rehearsal, my dear, was simply marvelous, of course. And he says this play could be a big Broadway hit. And she says, Thurston, you haven't said a word about my performance. And he says, no, I haven't, have I? Well, may I say, my dear, that you are simply splendid. Oh, thank you, Thurston, she says. And he explained that he can hardly wait for tomorrow night. But he does mention that Ginger is depressed because she doesn't have the role as Cleopatra anymore.
Yeah.
Gilligan comes in and explains that there she is, Cleopatra. But Gilligan tells Mr. Howell that Ginger's very depressed and very sad. There he is talking to Mrs. Howell. He says, I hope you're not going to be mad at me for what I'm going to say. But you see, the reason we put this play on in the first place, here's where he reminds Mrs. Howell. It was because Ginger was feeling so terrible about Broadway.
Oh, did
And
you
you're a
see that
very
look on her
important.
face there?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even catch that. She just gave the, oh shit, what did I do? Look. I didn't even catch that.
Right. That's when she started to realize, she started to realize, what have I done? I forgot. Yep. That's what I'm saying. She's a great actress. Her face is very expressive. I love it. And he basically reminds her that Ginger, this play was for her, and now she's depressed again. And he reminds Mrs. Howell that you're a very important woman, Mrs. Howell. You got everything she wants, but Ginger doesn't. And he explains that, but this play is the only thing Ginger's got. And he explains, I hope you're not getting mad at me. And suddenly Mrs. Howell claims that she can't speak, that she has lost her voice.
Well, she didn't claim it. She just started mouthing things. And the one thing that would have made this so much better, but I know that back then it would have been really hard on the throat. Nowadays they got different techniques and different methods to do it. If she would just start going the raspy voice, shit, I think I'm losing my voice, instead of just mouthing it.
Well, she could have she could have done that, but I think she was trying to make it look like she lost her voice completely. Because if you read her lips, that's what she says. I lost my voice.
Okay.
I can't talk.
Well,
if you look at her lips,
I thought maybe the reason they just did the silent mouthing like that it was because maybe it was hard on the throat. There, and they did because over the years
it's possible, but I doubt it.
Developed techniques for this because I've had laryngitis before. You can still talk. It's just really raspy.
They had techniques then.
Okay.
Right, very low, and they had techniques then to do that.
Okay, I just didn't know if it'd be just like too hard on the throat or something.
Nope.
Especially if you have to redo the scenes over.
No, the difference is back then, whenever they did anything out of sound effects, it was all analog, and now it would be digital. So Mrs. Howell's listening to them as Gilligan explains to Mr. Howell that Mrs. Howell's lost her voice, and he says she's talking, but nothing comes out. And that's when Mr. Howell realizes, by George, she's got laryngitis. And that's her tapping on her chest saying that she can't speak. And Mr. Howell at first doesn't realize, and he's saying that this is going to ruin the show. I'm an angel with my wings clipped. Gilligan reminds him, well, anyhow, there was a girl in the chorus. or Mr. Howell is talking about her past memories. So here's they decide. Hold on just a moment. My dogs want a little bit of attention. Just a second. Get up there, Ginger. Put the screw up mic, does it? Hello? Hello?
No,
Hello? Hello? Can you?
yeah,
Hello, can
yeah,
you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you. Yeah,
God, these dogs! I'm about ready to lock them up. Every time, as soon as I start this stream, they start crawling all over me. They jump off my bed. One of them, they jump off my bed, then they want back on, and then they want off, they want on. And it's like,
pick a lane,
okay.
Skipper.
That's a lot of the reasons why I'm having trouble. So anyway, right, exactly. Anyway, so they realize Mrs. Howell cannot talk. So here we are with the actual play now, getting ready to begin, and Ginger's been recast as Cleopatra. And as you can see, they're getting all ready, and Mr. and Mrs. Howell are dressed in their fine clothes for the premiere. And we're those planks of wood, by the way, that they're sitting on, and the base for that stage are made out of planks of wood. So we have to assume those planks of wood had to come from the ship when it was blown apart.
Yeah, so maybe they salvaged it all when it ended up falling apart.
Right. So they had all that wood. And here they are getting prepared. And Mr. Howell calls curtain. And it looks like Skipper Gilligan finally has the part of the maid. And as you can see here, when he moves, and of course Gilligan walks the wrong way and into the wall. And he hears his line, "I see a ship." And he comes out. But at this point, they realize to just glue the cup to the board.
Yeah. Now here's the thing too. They could have totally made this just Ginger's thing where she could really her acting chops when they had Gilligan go in and out, changing costumes with different lines. Ginger could have really shined in that.
Well, yeah, but right, yeah, but they still have to keep it funny because the bottom line is it has to be funny. And here she are. She's going through her lines, and she mentions that she has a special message that she needs to send out. So she tells Gilligan, the maid, that please send for the royal messenger. Gilligan steps out the back door, and quickly the professor and Marianne are helping him redress as the messenger. And there he is dressed and heading back into the play. And he says, "Yes, you called for me?" And she says, "Oh, yes, I did." Let me go back there a little bit here. And now is where she's concerned, and she says no, she doesn't trust the messenger, and she calls out for the maid again. And once again, here comes the maid, and as you can see, Gilligan is getting a little frazzled because he's moving too fast. And Cleopatra tells the maid, "I decided that you must take this message." But then she realizes, but wait, a woman, you will be a suspect. Send me in my aged but trustworthy major domo, she says. And of course, Gilligan says, "Yeah, that figures." And Gilligan steps back out where the professor and Marianne are ready to redress him. And he comes back in. And she reminds him that Caesar's spies are everywhere. And she says, "What you know what to do if you're caught?" And she says, "To eat the message." Unfortunately, Gilligan doesn't understand and actually swallows the message. And Mr. and Mrs. Howell are not noticing, but they're having a wonderful time. And they hear footsteps. And here's where the skipper comes out as Mark Antony. And you can see Gilligan goes out the door. This is hilarious. I definitely laughed at this scene. And for those of you out there listening in rerun land or in the chat, I highly recommend it because this is one of the best jokes in Gilligan's Island. Mark Anthony comes in. Skipper did all that hard work. He finally has his lines memorized. He comes in and he's confident. And he says, "Greet thy happy sailor," as he walks on stage. Unfortunately, Gilligan is standing on his costume and tears it off of him. And he's standing on the stage in his underwear. And Mr. and Mrs. Howells are nonplussed. They just realize how everything is going well.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can be
And Mrs.
grateful
Howells
he's
says,
wearing
"Absolutely."
them.
Oh, yeah, exactly, right? And yes.
No, I was saying, just be glad he's wearing some.
Oh, yeah, I'd be glad that he's wearing underwear. And Mr. Howell says, "You didn't have laryngitis after all." He realizes that Levy was just putting on the act. Bravo, bravo, as they close the screen. I guess the play comes to an end. And here we are later the next day. And Gilligan accidentally walks into the skipper once again and knocks him down. The skipper does a lot of physical humor in this episode, I have to point out. A lot of stunts. I can see how he accidentally injured his ear. And Gilligan was explaining to him that he was just hanging up the wash to dry. And Skipper's asking him, "I want to talk to you about something." And he says, "I want you to forget something. I want you to forget how big I am, and that I'm your boss." And he asks Gilligan, "What did you think of my performance?" And Gilligan says, "I've forgotten." And which unfortunately frustrates the skipper. And who's been teaching him? And so we close with our episode and our ending credits. And once again, music done by the fantastic John Williams. Okay, so you have anything to say about our first episode before we go to our next one there, Gorilla?
No, I said everything I was going to say.
Okay, are we caught up in the chat? I guess we are. We have snakes and turtles and everything else out here.
Yeah, we got a whole zoo.
Thank you, Willa Greg. I appreciate your input. Okay, so next we are going to cover, let me make sure I got the name right. Birds Gotta Fly and Fish Gotta Talk.
Yeah, and apparently I watched the wrong episode.
Right. Oh, don't want our copyright. I hate when that starts. By the way, you remember last week when I highlighted this and it started playing just like that with sound? You remember that? And I was struggling trying to stop it. You remember that? I got a copyright warning. I had to cut that scene out. Well, I cut that scene out, and that took away the copyright warning. The problem is whenever I open a new file, this is a VLC player, it starts playing automatically, and I don't want to do that. Because when it does that, my StreamYard window is blocking it, and it won't let me push stop. So I've got to go in and try to figure out.
There should be a setting that says do not autoplay, because I think you might have autoplay on.
Yeah, I'm going to look for that. Yeah, exactly. Because, and it's my stupid StreamYard window on the bottom. It says StreamYard is sharing a window, and that blocks the controls. So when I open it to play.
Oh, you can hit hide on that.
I just did. Okay.
Yeah, you just have to hit hide, and they'll hide that thing.
Okay, I'm going to open up the subtitle really quick here. So we have our subtitles. There we go. Okay, so here we are with our SS Minnow and our faithful, wonderful crew heading out. And we have the introduction of the cast and our opening credits. And written by Sherwood Schwartz and his son Elroy and Austin Kalish. Written by Rod Amato. And here we are. By the way, everybody, this is our one and only Gilligan's Island Christmas episode. So I thought it was fitting that it happens to be just we're a few weeks away from Christmas. So here's our one and only Christmas episode. And what I want to explain is this is what is called a clip episode. Some of you out there may be familiar with that term, but essentially what it means is that the either the network came down and told the producers of the show that they needed to cut the budget and save money, or the producers themselves realized that they needed to ration money in order to complete that season. So essentially, what we get is a flashback episode. It's an episode where we're going to see clips from the first episode, and the only new scenes that we're going to see are the characters basically reminiscing about when they first landed on the island. I'm sure you've seen this done in other sitcoms and other TV shows before, and it's usually not very good, but we'll do the best we can to get through this. And so a lot of what you're going to see is probably familiar, and you're also going to see some clips from the unaired pilot that Gorilla and I first covered in our very first stream. So here we have Christmas music playing on the radio. And the castaways are excited, and they're putting together a Christmas tree. And they're explaining that this is the best they can do while they're on the island. And each one is saying what they want for Christmas. And Skipper says, you know what I want? A big, fat, juicy steak. There it is, a nice, thick, juicy steak. And Ginger says, well, I'd like to have Cary Grant, but I don't think Cary Grant will fit in my stocking. And what's interesting, too, is around the time she said this, he was close to retirement age. He was about ready to retire from Hollywood. This is around the time I think he did To Catch a Thief for Alfred Hitchcock. And Gilligan says, you know, if I had a wish, it would be that we get rescued from this island. And they tell him that's a wonderful Christmas wish, Gilligan. But I'm afraid that's just asking a little bit too much from Santa Claus, they tell him. And they hear an announcement on the radio. We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin. A group of castaways were spotted on a small island a short time ago by our Navy weather plane. The cast hears this, they get excited, and they all gather around the radio. And then the announcer continues saying a small excursion boat, which was presumably lost at sea, and he's explaining the SS Minnow. In the event the castaways can hear this broadcast, let me assure them that a Navy destroyer has been dispatched. And with that, they rejoice. For Christmas, I want to buy everybody their own island, says Mr. Howell.
Yeah. Now, I got a question there. I don't know if you could answer it. Go. Why would they send a destroyer instead of maybe just a regular like Coast Guard vessel to rescue them there? Why send the bigger ship?
Coast Guard stay close. That's the reason why they're called the Coast Guard is they stay close to the coast. They don't go out to deep sea.
Okay.
Right. So and not only that though, but maybe the destroyer was the closest ship in the area.
Okay. Okay. I thought they went. They traveled in fleets.
Nope. Coast Guard mostly stick to the coast, and they're for rescues.
Well,
people drowning, stuff like that.
This would be a rescue.
It would be a rescue, but they're deep at sea though, and like I said, the Coast Guard don't go out there.
Okay. And don't the destroyers usually travel to protect the aircraft carriers?
Well, yeah, at wartime, but when it's not wartime, they're just out there basically protecting the United States. They have like a kind of like a patrol.
Oh, so kind of like for pirates, like the Somali pirates and stuff like that.
Exactly.
They just dispatch a destroyer as a show of force.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
So, Mr. Howell says it. Yes.
I was just gonna say that'd be a good question for Indy because he was actually in the Navy part. He was actually on a cruiser.
Who?
Indy Tiger.
Oh, okay.
A guy I talk to occasionally. He was on my stream Monday.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, ask him next time you talk to him.
Okay.
You should invite him to our Gilligan's Island stream.
Oh, he's in bed by then. He's over in DC.
Okay.
He has to be up earlier than I do.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, this is a little late for some people. I apologize for that, guys out there.
Yeah.
So here's where they're all celebrating. They're excited, and the scene fades out. And here they are the next day, and Gilligan is building a bonfire so they can look. Well, I could be wrong. This is not the next day, but it's later that day. But Gilligan is on the beach building a bonfire for smoke signals for the boat.
Yeah. Okay. And welcome, Charles Bard. I'm not sure. I don't recognize you. Have you been here before? And he also said the military performed maneuvers in their area of fun time. Oh, I'm guessing meant from time to time. And they used to get radio reports from the USS destroyer Redwood on the news.
Oh, well, that's cool. And welcome, Charles. Good to see you there. And Skipper's also looking for boat. And Gilligan unfortunately accidentally steps in the fire.
Doesn't he
And
always do that though?
of course, yeah, that is one of the running gags they have. And Skipper explains to Gilligan that there's nothing you can do now to make me happy because the skipper is so happy for the rescue.
Okay, and
Now
Charles
Skipper says, "Oh, let's see if we can spot that ship out there." And he tells Gilligan, "Go ahead."
No, fish your line, fish your line.
Skipper says to Gilligan, "Well, let's see if we can spot that ship out there." And he tells Gilligan to get the binoculars.
Okay. And Charles Barr said one another episode in Ocean Liner passed very close to the island on the night when the moon was blue. Okay.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah. And Gilligan goes to retrieve the binoculars, but unfortunately, for some reason, Gilligan had put them in the fire. And he brings them out and hands them to the skipper, which of course burns Skipper's hand because they're hot.
They would not be
And
cool
here's
now.
the
They would not cool down that fast. They're just dropping them in the sand. They'd
yeah,
still
I
be
know,
hot.
right? But of course, they would still be hot and smoky and probably melted. But I guess these binoculars are made out of all metal instead of like these days. I think they're made out of plastic. So here's where Skipper explains we've had worse experiences. Remember when we first landed on the island? And here's where I mentioned earlier. This is a clip episode, so we're going to get a lot of reminiscing. In other words, clips from prior episodes. And Gilligan says, I sure do. After I lost the anchor, the compass broke. During the storm, I thought we were goners. And here's where it fades out and it cuts to the original unaired pilot, which, like I said, we covered in our first stream. And what brings this scene to the forefront and makes it interesting is this is where we have the original castaways replaced. So you can see the blonde there, Skipper. That character's name was Bunny, who was later replaced. And you can also see the other two on the left-hand side. You can see the two women and the teacher who is laying on the floor. All three of them were replaced for Ginger, Marianne, and the professor. So that's the reason why this clip we're watching was from the unaired pilot, not the aired pilot. And just like in the unaired pilot, out of the boat, wakes up Gilligan. Gilligan jumps out of the boat. And Gilligan explains to him how they're going to fix the boat with all those holes. And he says he's so happy that he could kiss the island, and he did. And he says the island tastes terrible. And here's the Howells. And Mr. Howell is not realizing that they're on a deserted island, says that he wants his luggage somewhere Liz can pick them up. And take us to their nearest hotel, of course. And Skipper has to remind them this island doesn't even appear on his Navy chart. So this is when he's telling them that they're abandoned or lost. And Mr. Howell says, well, you should have gotten your chart from a more reliable source. And Skipper says there's no more reliable source than the U.S. Navy. And Mr. Howell says, yes, from our department. I think someone ought to report him, says Mrs. Howell. They're not happy with what he said. Well, he'll be the watch I'll do. And here's where the professor says he'll have another try. Now, see, here's what I'm talking about. The professor was not in that very first pilot unaired episode. So they shot this scene around it and added it in here. So here we have, they're talking about the transmitter and wanting to repair the transmitter. And here's the talking to Marianne and Ginger. Sorry to be skipping through this, everybody, but I know a lot of this, we've seen this already. Skipper's orders, I'm supposed to cheer you up, says Gilligan. They were wondering why he was smiling when he should be depressed. You won't worry about the terrible mess we're in, says Skipper, or says Gilligan. And of course, Marianne says, Danger, what makes you say a thing like that? Well, there's every possibility we won't be eaten by cannibals, so I guess that's a good thing. If we're careful, we can stretch one food supply to last a week. So this is before they found food and water. And Skipper explains that meanwhile, Gilligan and I will explore the island. And as you can see behind Skipper is a mountain or rock. So we're obviously still in Hawaii. And this was filmed during the first unaired pilot, because everything filmed after the first pilot was done on the set in the soundstage. And as you can see, where we get our first opening scene, where Gilligan on the boat, grabbing their supplies so they can head out and forage for food. And you can see the trees behind him. But yet they use this scene in the beginning like he's in the harbor. So they kind of try to cut out and crop out those trees. And Skipper says, great. And Gilligan accidentally falls through the floor of the boat. And here we show once again from the unaired pilot, as Gilligan climb that coconut tree and try to look and see if he see any boats. And he reminds Gilligan that if he climbs the tree, they can see the whole island. And Gilligan climbs the tree, but he has a fear of heights. He's afraid to open his eyes. And Skipper tells him there's nothing to be afraid of. Look around. And Gilligan tells him, hey, you are right, Skipper. I can see the whole island from up here. And he starts to look around. And he sees some people, but they have a boat, Skipper. And Gilligan comes sliding down the tree, and unfortunately runs into the skipper and knocks them both down. And he says, did you say you saw people? He says, yes, sir, in a boat too. We're safe. So there's the skipper once again falling down. And Gilligan excitedly is running towards where he saw people and a boat. And here they come out to the clearing on the boat, on the island. And they say, woohoo, look, Skipper, look. Yippee, yay, yippee, yo-hoo. Oh, look, we got Yahoo there, even long before Yahoo. And then they realize that the boat and the people that Gilligan saw from the top of the tree is the SS Minnow and their very own castaways. And Gilligan realizes, and he's a little sad. So here's where we have where Skipper and Professor are trying to repair the radio and the transmitter. This scene was also reworked for this episode. It was originally in the unaired pilot with the original teacher, and we'll see a little bit of hint of that I'll show. And here's where Gilligan's talking to Skipper, and Skipper thinks he hears the voice on the radio. And Gilligan explains that we're trying to fix the transmitter. And Gilligan is going to go fishing. Professor asks the skipper if he has a smaller screwdriver, and the professor... Gilligan says... the skipper says yes, he has a smaller screwdriver in his toolbox. And here we have... This is the clip from the original unaired pilot. Except they reversed the shot, because in the unaired pilot, he was fishing from right to left, and now he's fishing from left to right. And we have the skipper working over by the boat, and the professor talking into the transmitter, testing 1, 2, 3, 4. And the professor hears a voice on the transmitter. Excitedly, he grabs the radio, runs back, and grabs the skipper. And as he comes back, they notice that the transmitter is gone. Let me show you that. Gilligan, not knowing, casts back the fishing rod and the hook and accidentally grabs the transmitter and pulls it into the water. So that's why when the professor and skipper run back over to the rock, the transmitter is missing. And then that's when they realize that the transmitter was right here. And Skipper has a radio in his hand, and as he's talking, Gilligan pulls back on the fishing on the pole again. The hook grabs the radio and pulls it off into the water as well. And here's where the skipper and the professor start running after the radio as Gilligan's pulling it into the water. Notice the way the professor is dressed, because we're going to see where they're going to intermix this with a cut scene from the original pilot with the original actor. And here we have the professor. And on the right is supposed to be the professor, but as you can see, it clearly not. It's the original actor who played a teacher who was originally replaced. You can see he's wearing different colored clothing, and his sleeves are rolled up to the shoulders. And here's where Gilligan and Skipper frolic around in the water, and they pull the radio out. And now we're back to the present day. And yes, sir, all in all, I'd say we were pretty lucky, says the skipper. And here comes the professor, Marianne, and Ginger's still listening to the radio. And they're saying that the crew of the SS Minnow will shortly be leaving the island. So the radio's explaining that the rescue mission is on its way. And they're all saying we owe it all to Gilligan and his Christmas wish. And here they are waiting with their suitcases on the beach, all dressed, and they have their suitcases packed, and they're saying, where's the rescue party? And Skipper says they'll be here anytime, Mr. Howell. And he says, I certainly hope so, or I'll have to change into evening clothes. And here's where Skipper talks about reminiscing again. Gilligan and I were talking about the first day. And then they say, how can we ever forget? We were all simply furious with Gilligan that day. And here we are back to a flashback. And here's where we're talking a scene where they pulled everything off the boat and they want to salvage all the pieces and equipment. And you can see Skipper still has his gun and ammo. And they're discussing how long do you think they can survive on the island? And they say, well, with the transmitter on the bottom of the ocean, that could be days or weeks or even months. But we got one box of matches left. And of course, Gilligan comes on the scene and they say, hi, Gilligan. And they tell Gilligan, you've got to use these matches very sparingly. And Professor says, Skipper, why don't you two get a fire started? And he says, I'll go help the others gather more wood to keep it going, says the professor. Good idea, Professor, says Gilligan. And here's where Gilligan's getting the fire started. And Skipper asks him, will you do me a favor? And he tells Gilligan about blowing on the fire to get it sparked. And Gilligan's not doing it right, of course, so the skipper's having to remind him. And here's we're back to the scene where they were building their huts that first day. And Skipper tells Gilligan that he's bad luck. Every time he comes around, there's always something going wrong. And Skipper's reminding him of what we've spoken about this in the past. This is the part where Gilligan saved Skipper's life. So Skipper says when the death charge broke loose, and Gilligan says, yes, sir, it was rolling across the deck. And, well, not exactly. You didn't save it, so you give me more. And then Skipper tells Gilligan, the only reason why you saved me is so you can give me more bad luck. And you've got to run along. I've got a lot of work to do, of course. And there he is trying to get rid of Gilligan, shove off Gilligan. Gilligan's back to fishing. Here we are. These are scenes from the first unaired pilot. As you can see, Gilligan is even dressed differently. I'm sure you remember this in Gorilla where the fish keeps dragging Gilligan back into the water.
Yeah.
And here's the Howells can't figure out what's going on and why Gilligan keeps fighting with the fish. And it looks like Gilligan has a big fish. And of course, Mr. Howell. At a time like this, water sports, I mean, really. So it looks like here we have a big pile of fish that Gilligan was able to catch. And we have our montage. And they can hear the voice of man on the radio saying, now it's time for your daily exercise again. First, let's try a simple bend, hands on hips. Gilligan hear this, and he hears the sound of the radio coming from the pile of fish.
Now, what are the chances you catch the fish that swallowed a radio, even though it's impossible for the fish to swallow a radio?
Right, because the radio is much too big. So Gilligan realizes that the radio is in one of these fish. And he realizes, he says the radio, the fish must have swallowed the radio. So he's listening to see if he can hear it. And he grabs the fish that he believes is in and heads out of there to tell the skipper and the professor. And the fish must have swallowed the radio. And then they realize that maybe the transmitter is in another fish. So they tell Gilligan, go get the rest of those fish. This scene was reshot from the unaired pilot. And on the unaired pilot, they did this on the beach. They actually did search for the fish, listening and looking for the transmitter. But here they reshot it for this episode where they're in the, as you can see, they're on the set of the lagoon. And maybe we can find the fish with the transmitter. So if they figure if they look, maybe they'll hear it. And Professor says if they tune to the same wavelength as the transmitter, maybe they can get a signal. If you talk into the fish and the transmitter's in there, and Skipper tells him that's a great idea, Professor. So they begin talking into the different fish. Of course, Ginger does it very nicely. And Gilligan is reading from a famous play called The Owl and the Pussycat. And I wanted to share something with you about that here really quick. Exactly the fastest, so bear with me, everybody. The poem that Gilligan recites. Okay, the poem that Gilligan recites is The Owl and the Pussycat, and it's written by Edward Lear and published in his Nonsense Songs, Stories, by Alphabets in 1871. Ooh, I just noticed we've got some new people here. Captain Infinity, welcome, sir. Hello, Carol. So glad to see you here. I hope you like Gilligan's Island. And Skogly. Here we go. Let me show these. We have Captain Infinity, Just Carol, and Skogly says, Infinity Raid. Aw, that's so kind of you, Captain. Thank you so much. We're about 3/4 of the way through our second episode, which is a clip episode. So the castaways, and it's also a Christmas episode. The castaways think that they're being rescued because they heard a news report on the radio that castaways have been spotted on an island. So now they're reminiscing over past episodes as they're waiting for their rescue. And the castaways are talking into the fish, trying to locate the transmitter. And here's what they discuss. They don't know how the fish managed to swallow the radio and the transmitter. At least they did discuss that it seemed that very improbable that the fish were able to swallow them both. And as you can see, they do have the transmitter here, so they are able to locate the transmitter. That's the big box the professor is working on.
Hello, Chris Longfellow. Hello, Scully, and hello, Captain. And hey, Carol. And Carol Long said,
Yeah, so good.
hello, all, Affinity Raid.
And of course, Gilligan wants to get involved, and that's the last thing they want to happen. And Gilligan says, Skipper, isn't there anything I can do to help? Yes, Gilligan, get some more wood for the fire. Lots of wood, he says. Aye, aye, sir, says Gilligan. And Gilligan sets off to get wood, as we see, and here comes Ginger. And Ginger asks, how's the professor doing with the transmitter?
That's a good one, Captain. That's a good one.
Show that on the. What are you laughing? What are you laughing at?
Well.
Yeah, put it up on the chat.
Well,
I can't see it unless you put it up on the chat.
I don't know if I can say this on YouTube, but it says, "What a wonderful." Let's just say a different term for a cat. Art, you are. No, the other one.
Hail, Carol. Hello, all. Affinity Raid, says Chris Longfellow. And Captain Affinity says, what a wonderful pussy you are.
I don't know if I can say that on YouTube.
Ginger and Mr. Howell coming in. And of course, the first thing that Mr. Howell says, if you reach your mother, would you ask her to telephone? So, of course, the Howells are still not quite realistically looking at things. And here's where they are. And here comes Gilligan with the wood. And Skipper and Professor are still working on the radio, trying to get that transmitter to work. Skipper, where can I? And Gilligan asks, where can he put the wood? And of course, stay where you are, don't come any closer, they say. He says, but Skipper, these logs are heavy. Calling CQ, CQ, I hear it, I hear it. So they hear the voice, they've got the transmitter working. And it means it works. Quiet, quiet, Skipper tells them. If anyone can hear me, this is the Skipper, you know, he says. And Skipper's, Gilligan's still standing there, struggling with the wood, says, where can I put him? And unfortunately, the Skipper says, just drop him anywhere. This is the Skipper, drop him. And he repeats, drop him. And unfortunately, Gilligan drops him right onto the transmitter and crushes it. And Skipper holds up what's left of the transmitter, which does not look like anything they can repair, unfortunately. And Gilligan says, wait a minute, Skipper, I know what you're going to say, and you're right. I threw the radio in the ocean, and I just crushed the transmitter. And as you can see, once again, we have Skipper very frustrated. And none of them are really happy. And of course, we're fading out of the memory again. Back to the current day where they're waiting on the island to be rescued. The boat should be there any moment. And they realize they still don't see anything. There's nothing there. And Mr. Howell says that I'll have the entire Navy demoted for this, of course. Thinking that he has control over the Navy, which he does not.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Well, what he'll do is he'll talk to his friends, who will talk to their friends, who will talk to their friends, and then you're all demoted.
Right, somebody up there is probably an admiral or something, right?
Yeah,
so Mr. Howell,
someone like Thurston Howell, he has friends in high places.
I'm sure he does. If not, then maybe Thurston Howell the second or the first does, right? Maybe his
Well,
grandfather.
if he doesn't have the friends,
So
he
the
has
professor
friends
comes
who
up with
have.
a great idea. Yes.
If he doesn't have friends, they have. He has friends who
Yeah,
have the
exactly,
friends.
right?
Yeah. This guy asked, did they get off the island? No.
Right. And considering he's a multi-million, well, and considering he's a multi-millionaire, he's got to have a lot of connections.
Yeah. And hey there,
So the
Scotty.
professor comes up with the idea, well, perhaps, hey, Scotty, good to see you. Says, well, perhaps we can get some information on the radio. And they hear the announcer on the radio saying the rescue of the castaways, the Coast Guard just picked up all the passengers and the crew who were marooned on the tropical island. The man on the radio says, and they're bringing them back to civilization. So, according to earlier reports, they were believed to be the crew of the minnow, but they were not. So, this is when the announcer says that they rescued the people on the island, but they were not from the SS Minnow. And at the same time, the crew of the castaways here realized that the radio report was not about them, sadly. And they say it was another island with other castaways. And Ginger's broken heart and saying we're not going to be saved. And the man on the radio says, so the happy group that was marooned for 11 years, safe and steaming for home aboard. Coast Guard cutter. And then Mr. Howell is offended. So there they are. There's a Coast Guard cutter. What do you know? And he said, we thought it was going to be the Navy at least. So you're right. It was a Coast Guard cutter that saved them. But not them, not these castaways. The Coast Guard cutter that saved the castaways they're hearing about on the radio must have been closer to land somewhere, since it was a Coast Guard cutter, not the Navy. And Mr. Howell's offended by that, because he thought it was going to be the Navy at least. And that's when Mrs. Howell says they're both terribly overdressed for a Coast Guard cutter. And Gilligan says, well, maybe we won't be here for 11 years. Maybe 10, 9, maybe 8, 7, 6, 5. But that doesn't seem to be cheering them up very much. And they all walk off one by one. And we have a fade to nighting. And the castaways are sitting around the fire, depressed because they weren't rescued. And it's Christmas Eve and we're still on the island, they say. And they're reminiscing and wishing they said they could have been home by now. And Gilligan is blaming himself, and they're telling him, Gilligan, it's not your fault. And suddenly they hear from the bushes, Merry, Merry Christmas. Oh, Merry Christmas to you all. And out steps Santa Claus. Merry, Merry Christmas. Oh, Merry Christmas to you all, says Santa Claus, who's surprisingly wearing Skipper's shoes. And they're all, please tell us what we have to be merry about, they say. And Santa tells them, you might have been lost at sea and never reached this island, or you might have hit an island that had no food or water. So he's telling them and reminding them everything they had to be thankful. Or you might have all been blown. You might see, here's another important thing too. He says, or you might have all been enemies by now, which is totally true, which is a lot of times how things like that happen. Hence the story of the Lord of the Flies, the book. He said, instead of the family group that you are, who all learned, let me go back here. By George, this bearded gentleman is right, says Mr. Howell. Remember to be a good spirit. And Merry Christmas to all. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas. And Santa runs off. And then, as everybody's watching Santa leave, here comes the skipper with a bunch of wood. And he asks everybody, what are you looking at? And they look and they see him and they're surprised. They thought that was Skipper dressed as Santa Claus. But the skipper is confused. He doesn't know what happened. And Gilligan tells him, you'll never believe it, Skipper. And he says, "Well, never mind. Merry Christmas, Gilligan. Thank you. And they're saying Merry Christmas to each other.
Yeah. And the other Greg says, Santa!
And the skipper makes a wonderful day. And the skipper's confused once again because he doesn't really. Skipper hears ho 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 ho, so he didn't realize what had happened. He had missed it.
And here's Santa's
And they
being
say
a
Merry
dick.
Christmas, Skipper. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. And this is where Santa's a dick. He didn't even offer to take one of them off the island and tell them where they're at, or even call the Navy for them,
Well,
or call the Coast Guard.
maybe there's no room on that sleigh. Remember, it's that sleigh, and he's got all his presents packed in there, and maybe he doesn't have a radio to contact the Coast Guard. But you think he could have left him some gifts or some food or something, right?
Well, he could have taken one of them and dropped them off in like L.A. or in Hawaii or something.
See, I want him to say, "Hey, Santa, before you leave, can you take one of us with you?" And say, "Okay, I'll take Ginger." Santa's Santa, but he's not stupid. Okay, so here's where they hear jingle bells or the bells ringing, and they're apparently looking at Santa as his sleigh takes off into the sky at night. And we fade to the island and our credits, and we have our ending credits. So, Gorilla, what did you think about this episode, the clip episode?
I didn't get to see it. If I remember it right, it wasn't too bad, But
Scotty says, "Did they get off the island?" No, sadly, they did not get off the island, Scotty. Ahoy, says Scotty. And there's Ola Greg saying Santa. I did put a poll, everybody, in the chat if you'd like to vote. And tell us which episode did you like best, or if you liked them both equally, or if you didn't like them either of them at all. So let us know about that. And if you enjoyed the stream and if you like what you heard, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Hit the alerts and share this out to as many people as you can. I have a small, struggling channel, and anything that anybody can do for me to share the information is highly appreciated. Which episode did you like best, Gorilla?
what? Well, obviously the one.
Which episode did you like best?
Obviously the one.
When you saw the first one. So you're referring to the first episode that we watched, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Which was the play one, which was Angel on the Island. And I agree, I like the Angel on the Island much better too. And like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of these clip episodes where they have to reminisce. But it was still satisfactory for being a Christmas episode. It was nice for them to have that. And once again, I wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm gonna try to cover everybody that came along here. I wanted to thank Moira Kitty for being here. She was the first one here. Thank you. And Orla Greg. And I also wanted to thank Charles Bard for being here. Captain Finity and the wonderful Carol Scoglie is here also. And Scotty R37. Oh, Chris Longfellow. I think I got everybody. Scotty R37. And Orla Greg, yes, you're totally right. This is nice use of pilot episode footage. Yes, exactly like in Star Trek. How in fact, Jill and I will be covering the Menagerie next week. So it's the same idea there, where they use the unaired pilot, cut it up pieces, and then use it later on within the series. So yeah, it totally makes sense. I hear you yawning, Gorilla. I know it's getting late. Why don't you tell us about your channel, Gorilla?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I have 3 watch parties a week. Stranger Things Wednesday, a themed movie. We're on 6 weeks of Christmas for Sunday. Babylon 5 on Saturday. Walton's reviews on Wednesdays. Random shorts. I'm going to try to do a quote of the day there as much as possible. There, different quotes I've heard for you just to ponder.
Nice.
I don't know. I don't know if you liked my first one there. I know you're questioning it.
Oh
in the
no, it's
comments.
totally fine. I was going to show the poll, and it says poll complete. Why? I never ended it. What is going on with the poll? This happened too on my Monday stream, my Star Trek TAS. The poll was having problems, and now it shows that it never even. It says poll complete 5 episodes, and I never even had a chance to end it. I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's all. If any of you guys have had any trouble with your polls in your streams, please let me know. Maybe if there's something I'm doing wrong, I don't know. But I want to share the results of that poll if I can. And there it is. What did you enjoy most? We have a total of 5 votes. Angel on the Island got 40%, both equally 40. Neither one 20, so that was really close. And it says birds got to fly, fish got to talk 0. Oh, I see. Nobody liked the birds got to fly, fish got to talk episode, which is totally fine. Like I said, I wasn't a fan of it either. And is there anything else you'd like to say, Gorilla, before we wrap the stream?
No.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here. And I want to remind anybody out there on the rerun, if you're watching this later on, please like and subscribe to this channel. It's out here. I produce this content for you. I enjoy it myself, but I like to be able to share everything with everyone else. So the more of you, the merrier. And most of all, like I said before, this channel would not exist without the chat. So all of you that came along and took time out of your busy schedules to listen to us reminisce on an old show like this, I really appreciate it. And please join me on Mondays for my Star Trek, the animated series reviews with Anti-Derivative Jill and Scotty R37. And usually Gorilla's Random Thoughts is usually there. And on Tuesday, you'll catch me on Anti-Derivative Jill's channel, where we review Star Trek, the original series, which is usually with myself, Anti-Derivative Jill, and Scotty R37. And then as you can see on Wednesdays, we have our Gilligan's Island stream, where we're covering the original series, 2 episodes at a time. And Order Greg says later, Gators. Later, Order Greg. Scogli says, drink to friends. Thank you, Order Greg. And cheers. Cheers you too, sir. I think I will crack open a beer as soon as I end this stream.
Yeah. We'll see you, everybody.
Yes, take care, everybody. Once again, thank you. Like I said, you guys being here means everything to me. And I really appreciate it. And I want you all to have a wonderful night. Thank you all. Take care and peace.